Hello, welcome. Thanks for being here. It's Lotus, Art of Sacred Embodiment, and we're going to do a continuation today on the topic of walking towards divine union. So anybody who is interested in higher love partnerships and relationships, then this is the place, at least for my work with Art of Sacred Embodiment. This is where I can share the perspectives of my own experiences and the guidance that I get, and how this is all culminating into this next octave reality for those of us who are actively engaging and waking and consciously choosing a different experience, a different way of life, a different way of living from the inside out. So if this resonates with you, then give me a subscribe so that you will be notified. And if you've already subscribed, thank you. Appreciate you being here. So I was calling this something else before, but I feel like as I make more of these videos, as it's becoming more prevalent, it's becoming more of walking towards divine union, because that sort of fills in the spaces, since the majority of us are not yet fully embodying and anchoring in divine union yet. What I want to talk about today is a vision of where we're going collectively. And this comes from both personal experience and guidance, but mostly personal experience along this path in which I have been guided and invited by my own divinity, by my soul presence, to live. As we begin to move from karmic relationships, even from conscious relationships, even from the initiations into sacred partnership, we start to really get a whole new opportunity. There's a whole new game plan, so to speak, on how we live in romantic partnership. So the last video that I did had to do with basically the letting go of expectations and obligation. And as we let go of expectation and obligation, what is the commitment that we're bringing into our partnerships? I like the word commitment, but I'm not going to use the word commitment, which is definitely appropriate for specific functions. But I'm going to introduce that we are bonding together through reverence and honor. Now, these are qualities, these are frequencies, these are expressions of consciousness that we anchor in more fully in the divine union phase. But we start to be getting an opportunity to step into them, to learn about those frequencies of consciousness and how we bring them to the self and then into our partnership. When we start hitting these mid to higher ranges, developmental stages of sacred partnership, we actually are not in conflict that much anymore, right? So early on, we have, like, part of the relationship is we work at it, right? We need to work at it. We need to work through things. We need to discuss things. We need to compromise. We need to, really, really work through staying, even when times are hard, because we know deep down that this is the connection that we want. This does not at all include abusive relationships or lower level karmic relationships that are operating on pain and suffering and ways of acting out that are detrimental and damaging. So that's not what that's not what I talk about very much at all. It's relevant and it's important if you're in that stage and phase and you're moving, right? You're growing and evolving and expanding and healing. All of that is perfect, and it is a sacred journey. And it can be held with reverence as well, but that just is not the bandwidth that I'm here to bring anymore. I used to work with couples in that phase and stage, but as I evolve and shift, my work evolves and shifts. So when in the old paradigm, when we still are working through a lot of our issues, we hold a level of density, right? Which can be stuckness, rigidity, stagnation, unconscious behavioral patterns that are based on pain and suffering, that are based on oftentimes our inner child work that has not yet been resolved, the parental dynamics that have not yet been solved, and patterns that we've developed through our own heartbreak, right? Through our own loss of innocence, through our own, that threshold that we often cross over from our younger years into adulthood when we've begun to shut down our heart, where we don't really believe in our innocence anymore. We don't really hold that faith and trust in true love because there has been most likely heartbreak in whatever way, shape, or form, and there's a jadedness that happens. There's a disappointment that happens. There's a loss that happens. So we reorient ourselves to work and to be in relationship or to be attracted in relationships in ways that need to heal that whole pot of soup, right? We get to, here are the carrots here, here's the celery, here's the onion, here's that garlic. I don't know where that came from, but, but, right, so we get to take it apart and then heal each of those components. Now, that's in the density. And every time we go through a healing process, we let go of density and we come into a little bit more levity, which is higher frequencies, which is more light, which is expanded consciousness, which is more space in our heart to open and to be enlivened again. And we get to live from the body's experience rather than being afraid of the pain that oftentimes is associated within the body due to emotional and mental pain. When we've healed a good portion of that, we begin, and we'll just say in the edge of conscious relationship where we're still actively healing things together. And then sacred partnership is when we're actually operating from a healed self. So this can be challenging, right? To make this bridge if you're still in the deep levels of healing. But this is to say that this is where we're going. We aren't going to be in our pain bodies suffering forever when we're on this journey. And so as we begin to come into more of a wholeness, where we operate from self-responsibility, deeper levels of self-knowing, higher levels of integrity, self-honesty, and self-love means I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to be honest because I love you. All right? So this starts to create a different framework and template for relationship. And we both people in this space begin to recognize that we want the honesty, and we want to be honest. We want to live in alignment with our own individual true essence and soul presence. We want to be happy, joyous, and free. And we want the person that we're with to be happy, joyous, and free. To feel fulfillment. To feel a sense of celebration. Now, that is a very different frequency, and that is a very different way of attracting a partner or being attracted to a partner. When we're still working out in the karmic relationships, we're going to attract to us people who fit our wounding in a way, the way that I term it, the way that I termed it for myself back in my earlier years was our wounds fit like a glove, right? The hand slips right in, and it feels like such a good fit, and we're feeling that chemistry and those sensations that are really strong, and they can have an addictive quality to them. And a lot of people, we could say even like love addicts, right? Love and romance addicts, they become addicted to that sensation, to that chemistry. And so it's easier to go from relationship to relationship to feed that rather than healing on a deeper level and recognizing that when those high emotions aren't there anymore, it doesn't necessarily mean that the love isn't there. If both people are doing that work, it starts to mean that they're stepping into a higher octave of love that doesn't carry the fear of suffering. Okay, so that's over here. So it becomes a different experience. The less karma we have as well, the less chemistry that we're going to have with less numbers of people. Because what's always attracted us in the past, we could say, is our soul compelling us to come into the karmic relationships in order to do the work to heal. And in early stages of the karmic relationships, usually both people are not on the same timeline of their healing. Later on in karmic relationships, as we're tipping into conscious relationship, that can change. So we can graduate the levels of our opening and awakening and consciousness and higher expressions of love together. And still, even often then, people will grow apart because the reason they came together was to do the deep healing. When we're operating from more of a wholeness, right? I call it our holy wholeness. When we are operating from a higher vibration and frequency, that carries with us more vitality, more joy, more openness, more comfort in our vulnerability, more safety in our willingness to open to love unconditionally. And it doesn't mean that like we're completely unavailed, or completely unguarded, or that we're not still mindful and watching how things organically evolve, right? But what it does mean is that we aren't coming together with highly activated pain bodies anymore. And so there's a higher chance that relationships that come together through this template and readiness of sacred partnership evolve and grow and change together. The more that we know thyself, love thyself, honor thyself, right? Have embodied our lessons and our teachings of life, of other relationships, and we live from that now embodied wisdom. It means that we're not going to be addressing ourselves, our relationship, or the other with the high levels of activation or reactivity that often comes in our younger stages. So what it gives us an opportunity to do is be very honest and open. And because we're anchored in our center, somebody else's experience, our partner's experience that may not match ours, or their path, which may not match where we are feeling called to go. It doesn't happen because love has been damaged or lost. It can happen because we still love one another. And yet, we want the highest good for self and the other. And so, we are able to understand what that means and not take it personal. It doesn't land in the soup. My carrots are abandonment. My potatoes are fear of being unworthy, of not being good enough, of being unlovable, right? These are the main themes that we all struggle with. They come from, main childhood wounds and themes. They're common. So they're a shared experience by most of, particularly I'll say in the Western world. So instead, when we come into a higher love relationship, we don't come into it afraid of the ending. We come into it able to be curious and full of wonder, right? We are able to begin to access our innocence again. We're able to, which is like that sense of wonder, that curiosity, right? That unguarded, more vulnerable place that is going to be open to love and open to receive love without the fear of it being taken away. right? A lot of times we don't want to really take in that love, or we don't know how to receive, because if we open it up and then it's taken away, that pain of the abandonment or whatever our story is becomes too great. So we never truly open to receive. And this will be the same for our ability to give. How fully do I want to give the love that I have? So as we move into these higher templates of sacred partnership and divine union, there isn't, like, we're not operating from a gravitational pull or an electrical pull, a magnetism to our pain. Instead, as we've healed, we start to emanate our soul signature, which are layers and expressions of our true essence. It's who we truly are. And so when those signatures and frequencies speak together energetically, they're a match that harmonizes, right? So I like to go there, a match that harmonizes and brings mutual upliftment and joy and honor and celebration and deep love and freedom, rather than a glove, right? That, it just fits like a glove. And in that glove, we feel trapped in one way, shape, or form at some point. So this, like, for me, it's that elevation of all of our energies moving through the heart center with another, with a beloved, that there's already an alignment. When there's already a high vibrational alignment, there is less, I don't want to say opportunities, there's just less chances that there's going to be another separation. And if there is, it's handled from a level of maturity, spiritual maturity, emotional maturity, embodied maturity, and deep respect and honor for both parties involved and the entire life that's been created. So this is where we're going. All of this preliminary work is to bring us into these elevated states of being, because each person individually has to be in a level. And I'm not saying perfection. I'm not saying that there isn't ever going to be disagreement. But those disagreements, right, those where the frequencies get wobbly, where there's still healing that has to happen, they're gonna take place in that respectful, honoring way of maturation. And if they don't, which does happen sometimes, there's still enough awareness and spiritual, emotional maturation to understand what it is that's happening. And I'll just give, an example. So I think that, so my ex-husband and I, we have in 16 years of marriage and, 22 years of friendship, we have only ever really gotten into 2 fights, because we both came in at higher levels of operation in conscious partnership. And then we grew together and grew our relationship into more of that sacred partnership. the biggest fight that we ever had was my reactivity, my eruption. And that eruption came from exhaustion, physical exhaustion, and not really being clear and asking for what I needed or receiving what was being given. All right, so I'm going to take responsibility for the majority of the way that went down. And I was the one that got explosive and, not a very pretty sight. Not very pretty things came out of my mouth. And then he had a reaction as well, just stating the fact that, I was being really toxic. True that. And I owned it because, I felt justified in what I was carrying, right? So anyway, we came back together. And when we came back together after a couple hours, we were able to sit down. We were able to have a deep conversation. We were able to take responsibility for our respective expressions and the areas that we had not been owning appropriately, that we had not been embodying and stepping into. And the beauty of this was that we felt so much closer and more open and more heart connected after that. And it ended up being a really beautiful experience because we were able to take that density that I needed to clear and become aware of to trigger him and what he needed to be clear and aware of, right? And know that we were both safe in this, right? It wasn't abusive. There wasn't any patterns, but it was something that had to happen. And we trusted each other enough to know that that's just what it was. And then it was done, right? No more. Done. History. So that was the largest, blow up that we ever had. And we didn't actually have anything like similar to that in all of our years together. It doesn't mean we didn't have discussions. It didn't mean that we didn't, have points of disagreement or points of not being able to, meet the needs of the other person, not choosing to meet needs of one another at specific times based on understanding our own truth and our own circumstances, maybe tiredness, exhaustion, whatever, I don't remember. But right, those are some of the things that can come up why needs aren't being met, right? Overworked, like whatever. And we always knew, or at least, were able to reclaim our sovereignty and recognize it wasn't personal. It was never that we thought the other person didn't really love us. So we were able to move through a beautiful marriage, graduating through initiations into a sacred partnership. And we learned so much together, working these stepping stones together. And this is where we're going, right? And some of you may have that kind of beautiful harmony, high vibrational, because you've healed, not because we're better than. It's not a hierarchy, but what it is stages and phases of the healing that does have to happen from this point in order to get to a more heart-centered expansion. So I think I'm going to end this here. And again, I love comments and perspectives and experiences, because this is a personal journey for every one of us. And all of our experiences and perspectives are valid. So it's how we each are moving through our own soul processes into this new paradigm that is like tapping on our shoulder. All right. Many blessings. Much love.